Hey there, welcome back to Story Slices, where we slice through the best Reddit tales just for you. Let's dive right into the first story. The first one is the Tittle story, and it starts like this. Living in Tornado Alley, you learn to respect the power of nature. I've seen firsthand what a twister can do to a neighborhood, reducing homes to splinters in minutes. That's why, when my wife Sarah and I moved into our new house in Oak Ridge Estates, building a storm shelter was at the top of our to-do list. We'd saved for years to afford this place, a modest 3-bedroom ranch on a quiet cul-de-sac. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours, and we were determined to make it as safe as possible for our growing family. Sarah was 5 months pregnant with our first child, and the thought of riding out a severe storm without proper protection made my stomach churn. I've been looking into storm shelter options, I told Sarah one evening as we sat on our new patio, enjoying the warm spring air. I think we should go with an underground concrete bunker. It's the safest bet. Sarah nodded, her hand resting on her baby bump. I agree, Tom. After what happened to the Johnsons last year. She trailed off, and I knew we were both thinking of the family a few towns over who'd lost everything, including their lives, when an EF4 tornado obliterated their home. Exactly, I said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. We'll get the best we can afford. I've already contacted a few reputable companies for quotes. Over the next few weeks, we did our research, got multiple estimates, and finally settled on a company with an excellent track record. They specialized in custom-built, reinforced concrete shelters that could withstand even the most powerful tornadoes. It wasn't cheap, but we figured you can't put a price on your family's safety. The day the construction crew arrived, I felt a mix of excitement and relief. As they began excavating our backyard, I couldn't help but smile, imagining the peace of mind this shelter would bring us. That's when I first noticed Harold Finch, the president of our neighborhood's homeowners association, peering over the fence. He was in his mid-60s, with a perpetual scowl that seemed to deepen as he watched the work progressing. "Morning, Harold," I called out, trying to be neighborly despite the man's less-than-friendly demeanor. He grunted in response, his eyes narrowing. "What's all this then?" he demanded, gesturing at the construction. I walked over to the fence, ready to explain. "We're putting in a storm shelter. You know how bad the twisters can get around here." Harold's frown intensified. "Did you get HOA approval for this project?" I blinked, taken aback. I didn't realize we needed approval for a safety measure like this. It's all up to code, and we've got the proper permits from the city. HOA rules clearly state that any external modifications or additions to properties must be approved by the board, Harold said, his voice taking on a lecturing tone. This includes landscaping changes, which your little hole in the ground certainly qualifies as. I felt my temper rising but tried to keep my voice level. "Harold, this isn't a cosmetic change. It's a necessary safety feature. Surely the HOA can't object to that." He sniffed dismissively. "Rules are rules, young man. I suggest you halt this construction immediately and submit a formal request to the board. Otherwise, you'll be in violation of your HOA agreement." With that, he turned and marched back to his house, leaving me standing there, dumbfounded. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could anyone object to a storm shelter in an area prone to deadly tornadoes? I went back inside to tell Sarah about the encounter. Her eyes widened in disbelief as I recounted Harold's words. "That's ridiculous," she exclaimed. "They can't possibly prevent us from building something that could save our lives." I ran a hand through my hair, frustration building. "I know, but Harold seemed pretty adamant. I'm going to call our lawyer, just to be safe. In the meantime, I think we should continue with the construction. I'd rather ask for forgiveness than permission when it comes to our safety." Sarah nodded in agreement. "Absolutely. We can't risk delaying this. What if a storm hits before it's finished?" Over the next few days, work on the shelter continued. I kept a wary eye out for Harold or any other HOA board members, but no one else approached us. I hoped that maybe Harold had been bluffing, or that common sense had prevailed. I should have known better. 5 days after our conversation, just as the shelter was nearing completion, an official-looking letter arrived in our mailbox. With a sense of dread, I tore it open and read, "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, it has come to our attention that you are constructing an unapproved structure on your property. This is in direct violation of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association bylaws, specifically Section 3, Paragraph 2, which states, 'No external modifications, additions, or landscaping changes may be made to any property without prior written approval from the HOA board. You are hereby ordered to cease all construction immediately and restore your property to its previous condition within 14 days. Failure to comply will result in fines of $100 per day until the violation is remedied. If you wish to appeal this decision, you may submit a formal request for a hearing before the board. Sincerely, Harold Finch, President, Oak Ridge Estates HOA." I felt a surge of anger as I read the letter. How dare they try to interfere with our family's safety? I stormed into the house, waving the paper. "Sarah, you won't believe this," I said, handing her the letter. She read it quickly, her face growing increasingly red. "They can't be serious," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. "Oh, they're serious all right," I replied, pacing the living room. "But there's no way I'm tearing out that shelter. We need to fight this." Sarah nodded firmly. Agreed. Let's call Jack. Jack Lawson was an old college friend of mine who had gone on to become a successful lawyer. He specialized in property disputes and had a particular dislike for overzealous HOAs. I dialed his number, hoping he'd be able to help us out of this mess. Jack Lawson speaking, came his familiar voice after a few rings. Jack, it's Tom Thompson. I've got a situation here, and I could really use your advice. I quickly explained the situation to Jack, reading him portions of the HOA letter. As I spoke, I could almost hear him sitting up straighter, his interest piqued. Tom, my friend, Jack said when I finished, you've got yourself a hell of a case here. First things first, don't stop construction on that shelter. In fact, if you can get it finished before they try to take any action, that would be ideal. Really? I asked, surprised. Won't that just make things worse? Jack chuckled. In terms of the HOA's reaction? Probably. But legally, it puts us in a much stronger position. It's a lot harder for them to force you to remove an existing structure, especially one with such clear safety implications. He continued, his voice taking on a more serious tone. Listen, Tom, what the HOA is doing here is not just unreasonable, it's potentially illegal. Most states have laws that prevent HOAs from interfering with safety measures like storm shelters. We're going to fight this, and we're going to win. His confidence was reassuring, but I still felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach. What should we do next? I asked. First, document everything, Jack advised. Take photos of the construction process, keep all communications with the HOA, and start a log of any interactions you have with board members. Next, I want you to research your local and state laws regarding storm shelters. I'll do the same on my end. He paused for a moment, then added, and Tom, be prepared for things to get ugly. HOAs can be incredibly stubborn, and some board members take their power way too seriously. But don't let them intimidate you. You're in the right here. After thanking Jack and hanging up, I filled Sarah in on his advice. She listened intently, her expression a mix of determination and worry. We're doing the right thing, she said firmly, placing a hand on her growing belly. This isn't just about us anymore. We have to think about our baby's safety too. I nodded, pulling her into a hug. You're right. We'll see this through, no matter what it takes. Little did we know just how much it would take, and how nasty things were about to get in our quiet little neighborhood. The next day, as the construction crew was putting the finishing touches on our storm shelter, I spotted Harold Finch marching across our front lawn, flanked by two other men I recognized as HOA board members. Their faces were set in grim expressions as they approached me. Mr. Thompson, Harold began, his voice dripping with condescension, I see you've chosen to ignore our cease and desist order. This is a serious violation of HOA rules. I stood my ground, remembering Jack's advice. Harold, this is a necessary safety measure for my family. We have every right to protect ourselves from severe weather. One of the other board members, a portly man named Frank, chimed in. Rights? The only rights you have here are the ones outlined in the HOA agreement you signed when you bought this house. And right now, you're in clear violation of that agreement. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. Gentlemen, I understand your concern for the neighborhood's appearance, but surely you can see that a storm shelter is different from, say, painting my house hot pink or putting a junk car on blocks in the front yard. This is about safety. Harold scoffed. Safety? Please? Please? This neighborhood has existed for 30 years without these eyesores. If you're so concerned about tornadoes, perhaps you should have chosen a different place to live. His callous words made my blood boil, but before I could respond, Sarah emerged from the house. She had clearly overheard the conversation. Excuse me? She said, her voice steady but with an edge of steel I rarely heard. But are you actually suggesting that we should have to choose between living in a nice neighborhood and protecting our family from deadly storms? The third board member, a woman named Karen who I'd always found to be more reasonable than Harold, had the decency to look uncomfortable. Mrs. Thompson, we understand your concerns, but there are procedures in place for a reason. If we let one homeowner ignore the rules, soon everyone will think they can do whatever they want. Sarah placed a protective hand on her belly, fixing Karen with a hard stare. And if a tornado hits and kills someone because they weren't allowed to have a storm shelter, will you sleep well at night knowing you prioritized procedures over human lives? An uncomfortable silence fell over the group. Harold was the first to recover, his face reddening with anger. This discussion is over, he snapped. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, you have 48 hours to fill in that hole and restore your yard to its previous condition. If you fail to comply, we will begin issuing fines and may pursue further legal action. With that, he turned on his heel and stormed off, Frank following close behind. Karen lingered for a moment, looking conflicted. I'm sorry it's come to this, she said quietly. For what it's worth, I think you're right about the shelter being important, but I'm outvoted on the board. As she walked away, I turned to Sarah, my heart swelling with pride at how she had stood up to them. You were amazing, I told her. She managed a small smile. Thanks. I just couldn't believe how pig-headed they're being about this. What are we going to do now? I wrapped an arm around her shoulders. We're going to finish this shelter, and then we're going to fight. Jack said he'd start preparing a case for us. In the meantime, we document everything and stand our ground. Over the next few weeks, true to Harold's word, the fines started rolling in. Every day, a new notice would appear in our mailbox, each one detailing the accumulating charges for our ongoing violation. It was infuriating, but we stood firm, guided by Jack's advice and our own conviction that we were doing the right thing. The shelter was completed, a solid, reassuring presence in our backyard. It was built to be as unobtrusive as possible, with only a small entrance visible above ground, which could easily be disguised with some strategic landscaping. But to Harold and his cronies, it might as well have been a giant neon sign. The tension in the neighborhood was palpable. Some of our neighbors, hearing about our dispute, came to express their support quietly. Others, either intimidated by the HOA or sharing their views, gave us a wide berth. One evening, about a month into our standoff, our doorbell rang. I opened it to find Karen, the HOA board member who had seemed sympathetic to our cause, standing on our porch. She glanced around nervously before speaking. "Can I come in?" she asked in a low voice. "I have some information you might find useful." Intrigued, I invited her inside. Sarah joined us in the living room, eyeing Karen with a mix of curiosity and caution. Karen took a deep breath before speaking. "I want you to know that I don't agree with how Harold and Frank are handling this situation. It's gone too far." "What do you mean?" I asked. She leaned forward, lowering her voice as if afraid of being overheard. "They're planning to file a lawsuit against you. They want to force you to remove the shelter and pay all the accumulated fines, plus their legal fees." Sarah gasped. "They can't be serious. Over a storm shelter?" Karen nodded grimly. "Harold sees this as a personal challenge to his authority. He's convinced that if he lets this slide, it'll undermine the HOA's power. Frank is just going along with it because he always does what Harold wants." I felt a surge of anger but also a flicker of hope. This kind of overreach could work in our favor. "Thank you for telling us, Karen. Can I ask why you're sharing this information?" She sighed, looking tired. "Because it's not right. I joined the OA board to help maintain our neighborhood, not to bully people or put lives at risk. I've tried to reason with them, but they won't listen. I'm planning to resign from the board, but I wanted to warn you first." As Karen left, Sarah and I looked at each other, a mix of emotions playing across our faces. "We need to call Jack," Sarah said, and I nodded in agreement. When we filled Jack in on Karen's warning, he let out a low whistle. "Well, they're certainly playing hardball, but this could actually work to our advantage." "How so?" I asked. "Their aggressive stance and unwillingness to compromise makes them look unreasonable," Jack explained. "Plus, the fact that one of their own board members disagrees so strongly that she's willing to resign, that's gold in terms of building our case." He paused for a moment, then continued, "I think it's time we go on the offensive. Instead of waiting for them to sue us, we're going to sue them." The idea of taking the fight to the HOA was both exciting and terrifying. "On what grounds?" Sarah asked. "Several," Jack replied, and I could hear the excitement in his voice. "First, we'll argue that the HOA is exceeding its authority by interfering with a critical safety measure. Many states have laws protecting homeowners' rights to install storm shelters, regardless of HOA rules. Second, we'll claim that they're acting in bad faith and contrary to public policy by prioritizing aesthetic concerns over resident safety. And third, we'll allege selective enforcement of their rules, especially if we can find examples of other unapproved modifications they've overlooked." It was a lot to take in, but Jack's confidence was infectious. "What do you need from us?" I asked. "Keep documenting everything," he said, "and start talking to your neighbors. Quietly gather information about other modifications or structures in the neighborhood that might not have HOA approval. The more examples we can find, the stronger our case becomes." Over the next few weeks, Sarah and I became amateur detectives in our own neighborhood. We took walks, casually chatting with neighbors and discreetly noting any structures or changes that seemed to bend the HOA rules. A shed here, a non-standard fence there, several satellite dishes that definitely weren't in the approved list of exterior additions. Meanwhile, Jack was busy preparing our lawsuit. He filed for an injunction to prevent the HOA from enforcing their fines or taking any action against our storm shelter while the case was pending. It was granted, much to Harold's visible frustration when the notice was delivered. The day we filed our lawsuit against the Oak Ridge Estates HOA was surreal. I never imagined I'd be involved in something like this, but as Jack reminded us, sometimes you have to fight for what's right. The response from the neighborhood was mixed. Some residents, emboldened by our stand, came forward with their own stories of HOA overreach. Others, particularly those close to Harold, became even more hostile, going so far as to avoid us entirely. As the case progressed, life in Oak Ridge Estates became increasingly tense. Harold and his supporters on the HOA board seemed determined to make our lives difficult in any way they could. They scrutinized every aspect of our property, issuing citations for the smallest infractions: grass half an inch too tall, a hose left out overnight, you name it. But we stood our ground, encouraged by Jack's updates on the case and the quiet support of neighbors who agreed with our stance, even if they were too afraid to say so publicly. The turning point came about 2 months into the legal battle. It was a warm Saturday afternoon, and Sarah and I were in the backyard, planting some flowers around the entrance to our storm shelter in an attempt to make it blend in better with the landscape. Suddenly, the sky darkened ominously, the wind picked up, and we heard the distant rumble of thunder. Within minutes, the emergency sirens began to wail, a tornado warning. "We need to get inside," I said urgently, helping Sarah to her feet. At 7 months pregnant now, her movements were slower, more careful. As we made our way to the shelter, we heard shouts from nearby. Looking over, we saw our next-door neighbors, the Millers, standing in their backyard, looking panicked. "Tom? Sarah? Mr. Miller called out. Would it be possible?" I understood immediately. "Get over here, quick," I shouted back. The Millers, John, his wife Lisa, and their 2 young children, rushed over to our yard. Together, we all hurried into the shelter, securing the heavy door behind us. Inside, the shelter was spare but comfortable, stocked with emergency supplies, battery-powered lights, and a weather radio. As the wind howled outside, we huddled together, listening to the updates. "Thank you so much," Lisa Miller said, clutching her children close. We should have supported you more openly with the HOA. This shelter, it could save lives." I nodded, accepting her words. "We're just glad you're safe. That's what matters." For the next hour, we waited out the storm. The tornado didn't hit us directly, but it came close enough that we could hear the roar of its winds even in our underground sanctuary. When it was finally safe to emerge, we were met with a scene of chaos. While our immediate area had been spared the worst, parts of the neighborhood hadn't been so lucky. Trees were down, power lines scattered across roads, and several houses had significant damage. As we stood there, surveying the aftermath, a group of our neighbors approached. Among them was Harold Finch, looking shaken and, for once, at a loss for words. One of the neighbors, an elderly woman named Mrs. Patel, spoke up. "Is everyone all right? We saw you all go into the shelter." I nodded. "We're fine, thanks to the shelter. How about the rest of the neighborhood?" There was a murmur among the group. Another neighbor, Bob from down the street, cleared his throat. "The Johnson's house got hit pretty bad. They're okay, but, well, if they'd had a shelter like yours..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. The implication was clear to everyone, including Harold, who was staring at our storm shelter with a mix of emotions playing across his face. In that moment, standing amidst the aftermath of the storm, surrounded by neighbors who had just faced a very real threat, the absurdity of the HOA's stance became glaringly apparent. Mrs. Patel turned to Harold. "I think it's time to end this foolishness, don't you? These shelters should be encouraged, not punished." Harold, for once, seemed at a loss for words. He opened his mouth as if to argue, then closed it again, looking defeated. The events of that day marked a turning point in our legal battle. News of the near-miss tornado and how our shelter had protected not just us, but our neighbors spread quickly. Public opinion, already leaning in our favor, now shifted decisively. In the days that followed, Jack called with exciting news. "Tom, Sarah, the HOA wants to settle," he said, the satisfaction clear in his voice. "They're offering to drop all fines, amend the HOA rules to explicitly allow storm shelters, and cover our legal fees." Sarah and I exchanged a look of disbelief. "That's fantastic," I said. "But why the sudden change of heart?" Jack chuckled. "Let's just say the combination of bad publicity, the clear demonstration of the shelter's necessity, and the threat of a very public, very embarrassing court case has made them see reason. Plus, I may have hinted that we were considering adding a claim for intentional infliction of emotional distress, especially given Sarah's pregnancy. They don't want this to go any further." We agreed to the settlement, on the condition that the HOA also issue a public apology and commit to a more transparent, safety-focused approach to neighborhood governance. The day the settlement was finalized felt like a weight lifting off our shoulders. Harold Finch, looking decidedly less imperious than usual, read out a public apology at an emergency HOA meeting. "On behalf of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association, I would like to extend our sincerest apologies to Tom and Sarah Thompson," he began, his voice strained but clear. "Our actions regarding their storm shelter were misguided and potentially dangerous. We lost sight of our primary duty, to ensure the safety and well-being of our community members." As he continued, detailing the changes that would be made to HHA policies and promising a more collaborative approach in the future, I felt a sense of vindication wash over me. This had never been about winning a fight or proving a point. It was about standing up for what was right, about protecting our family and our community. In the weeks that followed, several of our neighbors approached us about installing their own storm shelters. The HOA, true to their word, streamlined the approval process, even going so far as to provide recommendations for reputable contractors. Karen, who had resigned from the HOA board during the dispute, was elected as the new president in a special election. Under her leadership, the association began to focus more on community building and safety initiatives, rather than rigid rule enforcement. As for Harold Finch, he kept a low profile after the settlement. I saw him occasionally, working in his yard or walking his dog, but the imperious attitude was gone. Once he even nodded to me in passing, a small gesture, but one that spoke volumes about how things had changed. The night after the settlement was finalized, Sarah and I sat on our back porch looking out at the now famous storm shelter. The entrance was almost hidden by the flowers and shrubs we'd planted around it, blending seamlessly into our backyard landscape. "You know," Sarah said, her hand resting on her very pregnant belly, "in a weird way, I'm almost grateful for this whole ordeal." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? Even with all the stress and the legal battle?" She nodded. "It brought the neighborhood together in a way I never expected, and it showed us that standing up for what's right, even when it's hard, is always worth it. That's a lesson I want our child to learn." I reached over and took her hand, feeling a surge of love and pride. "You're right, and who knows? Maybe our little one will grow up to be a community activist, fighting for storm shelter rights across the country." Sarah laughed, the sound carrying across the quiet evening. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. For now, I'll settle for a safe, happy baby in a home protected from whatever storms may come, literal or figurative." As we sat there, enjoying the peace we'd fought so hard for, I reflected on the journey we'd been through. It hadn't been easy, but we'd stood our ground, fought for what we believed in, and come out stronger for it. Our storm shelter stood as a testament to that strength, a silent guardian for our family and a symbol of a community that had learned to value safety and cooperation over rigid rules and power struggles. The next morning, I woke up early and went out to the backyard. The sun was just rising, casting a golden glow over the neighborhood. I walked over to our storm shelter and placed my hand on the cool metal of the door. It was more than just a structure now. It was a reminder of what can be accomplished when you stand up for what's right. As I stood there, I heard a voice call out, "Morning, Tom." I turned to see Bob, our neighbor from down the street, walking over to the fence. He had a blueprint rolled up under his arm. "Morning, Bob," I replied, walking over to meet him. "What's that you've got there?" He grinned, unfurling the blueprint. "Plans for my own storm shelter. Figured it was about time I got on board with this safety thing. Mind if I pick your brain about the construction process?" I couldn't help but smile. "Not at all, Bob. Come on over, I'll show you ours and we can go through the details." As Bob climbed over the fence and we walked towards the shelter, I felt a sense of community that had been missing before. This wasn't just about one family's fight anymore. It was about a neighborhood coming together, looking out for each other, and being prepared for whatever nature might throw our way. In the distance, I could see other neighbors emerging from their houses, ready to start their day. Karen, our new HOA president, was out for her morning jog. She waved as she passed by, and I waved back, feeling a sense of camaraderie that would have been unthinkable just a few months ago. As Bob and I pored over his plans, discussing the best placement for his shelter and the various features he might want to include, I realized that our ordeal had brought about a change far beyond just winning a legal battle. We had sparked a transformation in our community, shifting the focus from rigid rule enforcement to genuine concern for each other's well-being. Sarah joined us a little later, coffee mug in hand, her other hand resting on her now very prominent baby bump. As she listened to our discussion, adding her own insights here and there, I could see the pride in her eyes. We had fought this battle not just for ourselves, but for our child and for all the children in the neighborhood who deserve to grow up in a safe, caring community. Later that day, as we prepared for the neighborhood's first ever emergency preparedness meeting, an initiative started by Karen in the wake of our case, I took a moment to reflect on how far we'd come. From feeling isolated and under attack, we were now at the heart of a community that was stronger and more united than ever. The storm shelter that had caused so much controversy stood as a silent testament to our perseverance, a symbol of safety and community resilience. But more than that, it was a reminder that sometimes, standing up for what you believe in can lead to changes far beyond what you initially imagined. As we locked up the house and headed to the community center for the meeting, I couldn't help but feel optimistic about the future. We had weathered a different kind of storm together, and come out stronger for it. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew that our little corner of the world was better prepared to face them, not just because of the physical shelters we were building, but because of the bonds we had forged in the process. And as Sarah and I walked hand in hand down the street, nodding and smiling at neighbors who were now friends rather than adversaries, I knew that we had built something far more valuable than just a storm shelter. We had helped build a true community, one that would stand strong against any storm, real or metaphorical, that might come our way. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow at Story Slices.